Welcome to another episode of Central Intelligence brought to you by Off the Glass. Be sure to follow along with us on Twitter at OTG Basketball. I'm your host, Kory Waldron. Matt couldn't be with us this week, but filling in for him, we have the man himself, the founder and owner of OTG, Nick Fay. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Kory. I'm so happy to be on here. I thought Matt was supposed to be here, but he couldn't make it, so he's doing some personal stuff. We wish him the best, but I'm excited for this, talk some Central Division. Got a lot to talk about, too, a little March Madness and more life. But let's get started.
You know, it's always fun to talk hoops with you, so I'm glad we could get you on, even though Matt couldn't be here. Nick, it's March. There's a lot of madness going on this month. Let's just touch on a little bit of madness from the NCAA tournament. Did you have Duke going to the Final Four?
Yeah, luckily my bracket never saved on ESPN, so there's no proof of this. But I had Duke going pretty far, but it looks like they got knocked off yesterday. Tough loss for Coach K. And, I mean, what do you think about this? What do you think about the draft stock of, some of the big-name players in that game, like Tatum? Do you think this hurts him? Or
I think it does hurt him only because you don't get to see him play on a bigger stage like the Final Four, obviously. But I think if anyone from Duke has NBA potential, Tatum has got to be that guy. And actually, he's probably one of my top 5 favorite prospects in this draft upcoming.
And I heard of some people said like yesterday was a perfect example how Tatum was trapped by the college game, and he's probably going to be one of those guys that might be a better NBA pro than he ever was a college player.
Well, I mean, he's definitely got the size.
Yeah, and I mean, that's like something interesting to see. That's why personally, I'm not a big college guy. I'll watch March Madness a little bit, but during the season, I don't really watch college basketball. I'm all about the NBA. And personally, when I watch the game sometimes and I see these zone defenses and I see all these tough mid-range or long-range shots and people are saying, oh, this is better than NBA basketball, I'm just like, no, it's not.
No, it's not. It's not fun watching 8 passes, a 30-second shot clock, and then a clank at the rim.
Exactly. And that's what happened in the Duke game. It looked like those dudes were so gassed and all they were doing is shooting threes and missing and airballing them. So it's sometimes watching college can be really frustrating for me personally.
Now, last night, I know you saw some of the game and you probably saw some of the highlights. The Cleveland Cavaliers were down late to the Los Angeles Lakers, and they ended up coming back and winning even though they were down by 15. The big three is finally healthy. LeBron and Kyrie combined for 80 points. What are some of your thoughts, Nick, on the Cavaliers finally getting healthy?
Well, I think this is big for them to get healthy, and this kind of gives them a little bit more of an advantage over the Warriors because they're getting healthy now. And J.R. Smith and Kevin Love are going to be able to get their legs under them, get healthy, get into the rhythm, get in the chemistry of the team. So Kevin Durant has yet to come back, and he's still going to have to find his legs in the playoffs. And the Western Conference is a lot tougher than the East. So I think this is nice for the Cavs. It's also nice for them to get their chemistry growing because some of these teams in the East looking a little bit better than we originally thought going into the season. Washington, Boston, you want to be fully healthy, and you want to take care of business in the first or second round. You don't want to extend any of these series. You need all the rest you can get. It's been well noted that LeBron has played a lot of minutes this year, so getting those sweeps or those 5-game series in the first 2 rounds will be very important for the Cavs.
Yeah, I agree. And, it was – I watched the fourth quarter. I didn't watch the first 3 quarters of the game. But, seeing guys like Kyrie, he missed the game due to a little knee injury, and he comes out the next game after resting and scores 46 on 15 of 21 shooting, which is absolutely insane. LeBron did what he always does. He bullies down low. And then, J.R. Smith is finally getting healthy. He doesn't really have the touch yet. But, when Kyle Korver comes back, Cleveland is going to be fine. They're not going to lose this 1 seed most likely. And you mentioned how, the Cavs are going to, their biggest threats right now are the Wizards and Celtics. And the one thing the Wizards and Celtics don't have compared to the Cavs is just the overall depth. So when you get J.R. Smith finally healthy, when you get Kyle Korver back and you get all these shooters back, the depth and the three-point shooting of the Cavs will probably outlast the Celtics and Wizards, who at times their bench is a liability.
Yeah, no, exactly. And they're getting getting a player back like J.R. Smith back is actually a big boost. I know he can be like J.R. and he can be terrible at times, but last year and in the playoffs at times, he plays some really good defense. Yeah, I'm serious. He does play good defense at times, and he can really get hot. When you have that type of player that can score 20 or 30 points in a game, that just adds to your offense. We've seen plenty of times where he hits 4 straight threes. That's a 12-point run right there, So getting a player like that, you mentioned it, Kyle Korver is going to be off the bench. They're going to have solid players coming off the bench for the starters as well. And getting a player back like Kevin Love, and I think you could actually notice his absence during the Cavs' recent stretch without him. And then not just from his offensive output, but I think they missed his rebounding a lot, because I've seen a couple games without Kevin Love where they got killed down low. Do you think that, Love's going to bring back a lot with his rebounding?
For sure. I mean, last night's the perfect example. Kevin Love led the Cavs rebounding with 15 rebounds.
15, yeah. So
you can't replace that, because outside of Tristan Thompson, there's not a solid rebounder besides Kevin Love on this roster. Channing Frye's okay. Derek Williams hasn't been awful. But, you really need a guy like Kevin Love. Even though he doesn't play solid defense, you just need him on the glass.
Yeah, for sure. And that would have been something Bogut could have helped them with. Obviously, he got to play about 20 seconds for the Cavs. What do you think about the signing of Larry Sanders? Do you think that's going to be able to help them in the playoffs, or not much of anything?
I was surprised that he didn't play at all last night. I was kind of expecting them to start just using him more especially because the Lakers aren't good, as we know. So kind of would have been interesting to see them actually just give Larry Sanders like 20 minutes just to see how he looks on the court. I said this a couple weeks ago. I don't really think he's anything special. He's been out of the league for 2 years. I don't even think he'll probably be in the playoff rotation unless there was an injury to someone. But I just don't think there's enough time for him to gain any momentum to really become like a solid role player on this team.
Yeah, it's like there's a more likely chance for him to screw things up than actually help at this point.
Right. I think Bogut would have gotten time just because, he's been playing and he's a better defender, I believe, than Larry Sanders. But, yeah, I don't see him getting very many minutes.
And Bogut is the type of player that understands his role. He has a high basketball IQ, and he would be a nice piece to have if you have to match up against a big center in the playoffs. Like I mentioned before on my show, Andre Drummond or a Valanciunas. You want another 7-footer that can really bang around. That way you can kind of reserve Tristan Thompson so he's not so banged up when you get to the finals.
And, you just mentioned Andre Drummond. So that's just kind of segue to my next question. If you're the Cleveland Cavaliers, who would you not want to see in the playoffs between the Milwaukee Bucks, Detroit Pistons, and the Indiana Pacers? And I guess even the Miami Heat, because all 4 of those teams at this point could be an 8 seed.
Which one would I not want to see?
Yeah, which would be the biggest threat to the Cavaliers?
I mean, I don't think any of them would really be much of a threat. But for some reason, I don't think Detroit. I just think Detroit's so underperformed this year. Reggie Jackson hasn't really been consistent at all. Andre Drummond hasn't really progressed, and that whole situation hasn't really gone well. So I'm not really scared of Detroit at all. As good as Miami is, I don't think they're really talented enough to mess around with Cleveland. And I mean, maybe if the Bucks were healthy, I would say the Bucks. So I'm going to give you some props on this one. I'm going to say your Pacers, just because they have that superstar in Paul George that can relatively match up with LeBron in some type of way. And we've seen them have playoff success in the past against matchups where they weren't favored at all. Last season, they almost beat the Raptors in a 7-game series. So, I mean, I think the Pacers definitely would have a chance, and they have some veterans on that team that might play a little extra in the playoffs against the Cleveland team.
Right. It's really interesting how from the Central Division there's 5 teams battling for. Well, the Bulls technically are still in it, even though there's no way they're going to make the playoffs probably at this point. But it's funny how all these teams are battling for the 8, 7, and 6 seed from the same division, and they're likely going to face one of them. Will face the. I don't agree with the Pacers being the biggest threat. Not the biggest threat, but the biggest. I guess I would say challenge, because I think the Pacers would probably lose in 5 games to the Cavs. I actually kind of think the Bucks, oddly enough, because of Giannis. Giannis could play decent enough to lock up LeBron for 1 or 2 games. And the Bucks are playing some of the best basketball despite losing Jabari Parker, which is extremely confusing to me, because I thought they were going to go straight downhill. And I think
they got Chris Middleton back right at the right time that he kind of eased the pain of that.
Right. So you lost one potential All-Star for another potential All-Star, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
and the one thing Middleton added is that 3-point shooting that this team desperately needed.
Yeah, and I mean, they needed it bad, like you said, because Dellavedova, I know they got him to be that scrappy point guard and to shoot threes, and he's been an absolute dud.
Yeah, he's been outplayed by 2nd-round pick Malcolm Brogdon, a possible Rookie of the Year candidate. So, I mean, I could definitely see your point with the Bucks. That'd probably been my second choice. Because I could see Jason Kidd kind of whipping up some weird type of scheme to maybe steal a game for the Bucks, and Giannis obviously could have himself a 36 point, 12 rebound, 12 assist type game, and it wouldn't be crazy. And throw in maybe four blocks and 2 steals. So I mean, there is potential in Milwaukee, especially with the youth that they have, and they have some really long and weird lineups they can throw at you.
You know what does intrigue me though? Seeing a Dion Waiters versus LeBron James first round matchup.
Yeah, and Dion will just like be on some type of other shit, and he'll be
25 shots a game.
Yeah, that'd be fun to see. And I mean, like, I know some people want to see that just for the drama. Miami, LeBron has to face off against Spoelstra. So I mean, and they like all these teams are somewhat around the same level of talent and what I expect of them in the playoffs. So I said the Pacers, but I don't think there's like a huge gap between any of these teams. I think maybe I just dislike the Pistons. I don't know why, but the Bucks, the Pacers, and the Heat really could all be kind of around the same type of thing.
I mean, between you and me, I can't stand the Pistons, but that's because they wouldn't let the Pacers win a championship or get past them to play for a championship in the 2000s.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of surprised, Kory, you didn't back up your Pacers. I know you just wrote an article for OTG. You talked about, the Pacers possibly having their turning point. I know all season they've kind of been hot and cold. They'd win a few, lose a few, and no real consistency. What do you think about them going to the playoffs? Can they really be a type of threat to anybody? Can they win a first-round matchup, or is it just highly unlikely?
It would really depend on who they play.
If you had a pick, if you could get that one first-round matchup that you want, who do you think they'd have the best shot at beating in the first round?
Best case scenario, probably Washington, I guess. Even though I don't feel confident saying that either. Toronto's got too much size, so Toronto would just be – and we watched it last night. Toronto beat them by 20, and it was embarrassing because no one showed up again besides Paul George. Boston – I guess Boston actually between Boston and Washington, you want to play one of those only because, for example, Boston's having a lot of scoring outside of Isaiah Thomas. So I guess if you limit Isaiah, like we lost to the Sixers yesterday, and Isaiah Thomas wasn't there because he had a knee injury, and you can just see without Isaiah, this team just lacks any scoring besides Isaiah.
Well, yeah, they played a close game against the Nets the other night, and you could tell they miss Isaiah, they miss his playmaking, and this was a game where the Nets and the Celtics both scored under 100 points, which is super rare for this NBA. Right,
but like I would say Washington only because I think. Paul George has always played well against Washington because Otto Porter isn't, he's an okay defender, but he struggles against the bigger guys. So I would just say Washington, but the Pacers are so inconsistent, man. They play that game against Charlotte after having a team meeting, and you think, oh, this could be the turning point. Like I wrote the article, like you mentioned. Paul George has 39 points, a season high. He shoots for 15 for 21 for the game. And then the next game, he shows up, and again, you don't have anyone else showing up. Like last night, this is the most frustrating thing. Miles Turner took 4 shots all game.
Yeah, that's pretty disappointing. I mean, like you want to get that guy the touches, even if especially if you're not going to make a deep playoff run. He's the future, of this team, and possibly if you move Paul George, it's Miles Turner's show. So you want to get him his touches. You want to develop this kid.
That's what I'm saying. And he's 20 years old, or I think he just turned 21. And I understand, like, there's no solid number 2 on this team. Jeff Teague is a very streaky shooter. But, like, you would like to see a young guy like Miles Turner, just even if you're not feeling it, just take at least 10 shots. You're big enough, and you have, like, I can't tell you how many times last night watching the game I saw him hesitate on the open jump shot and then pass it off. Just take it. Shoot your shot.
He has the range too, and it's important for him to consistently develop confidence from long range, especially with the way the NBA is going. Having a 7-footer that can shoot makes a big difference.
And that's got to be the biggest issue, I think, at this point too, especially when they're down. When they're down, he doesn't want to be the guy, I feel like, to dig him in a hole. So he's more reluctant to take that shot. And it's just at this point building confidence for the young guy.
Yeah. Talking about that, I know you mentioned Jeff Teague. So the Pacers had a pretty busy offseason. They picked up Jeff Teague and Thad Young. What do you think of these moves now? How do you, grade them out for the season so far they've had with the Pacers?
Jeff Teague has been great. He's actually having a career year. He's averaging the most assists of his career with 8 per game. He's averaging 15 points. Thad Young, before he got hurt, you had given me high praise of Thad when the trade first happened, and you were absolutely correct. He's a high energy guy. He's gritty. He fights for the loose balls. He gets the rebounds. He had a decent game last night. I like both the moves. Thad's just getting back from a wrist injury, so he doesn't really have the strength behind his shot yet. But both those acquisitions were great. I mean, I don't regret having either. I mean, I backtrack a little bit. I slightly regret losing George Hill.
That's surprising to hear from you.
I'm not a big George Hill guy, but I have missed his defense simply because Monte Ellis now gets all of my rage because the guy can't stay in front of anyone. But, it was worth it because George Hill is not nearly half the playmaker that Jeff Teague is. So I like both acquisitions. I don't like the signing of Al Jefferson. That was a mistake because that guy can't move his way out of – he's like a snail running up the court. He's too slow. And it's unfortunate that the NBA has changed, that the big man is just no longer relevant.
Yeah, and I mean, the only positive about him is they got him on a good contract at least.
Yeah, 3 years, $30 million. So I guess that's the one. And honestly, too, to his credit – he's been a really good mentor to Miles Turner. He knows that he's a veteran, and he's not afraid to help the young guys out, which has actually, I think, been a benefit to Turner to a degree.
So if the acquisitions have been pretty well for the most part, what do you think's been the issue with this team this year? Why I know you had high hopes for them going this season. I was pretty high on them. I thought a top 4 seed was a real possibility. What do you think the reason is that they haven't reached that potential, or what's the issue?
It's the issue that most teams are struggling with, and I believe it's just 3-point shooting. You have to have 3-point shooting in today's NBA, and the Pacers, outside of Paul George and C.J. Miles, they don't have 3-point shooters. They're only averaging, I believe, 8 3-pointers a game, and Paul George and C.J. Miles count for 6 of those 8. That's not going to win you games.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to keep up with the teams and the pace that they play at today if you can't hit threes. And
right.
I've talked about that a lot on my podcast and a lot in OTG in general. It's just like the 3-point ball is so much more important just because you're getting 3 points for your shot instead of 2. It makes a big difference in the long run. You're hitting 10 threes and I'm hitting 10 twos. There's a difference right there.
I mean, for example, last night they had a lineup on the floor, and it was Rodney Stuckey, Monte Ellis, Glenn Robinson III, Lavoy Allen, and Al Jefferson. There is absolutely no 3-point shooting on that lineup. Besides, I mean, GR3's been solid, but we know he's the slam dunk contest champion, and he's more of a role player and a dunker than a 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
When you put a lineup on like that on the floor against a team like Toronto, who's got PJ Tucker coming off the bench, they have Norman Powell. You can't match up with that kind of scoring, that kind of lineup.
Yeah, and you're just going to get locked up. If you can't shoot the 3, like, people don't understand this. They're always talking about, like, oh, the NBA is so, like, they don't play defense, or it's, like, not that hard or whatever to score points. But the thing is, the athletes are so fast in the NBA. They're so quick. They're so long that you're getting less and less time to close out, less and less time to make plays at the hoop. So 3-point shooting is even more important than it ever has been. And if you're able to lay 5 feet off a guy, it's a lot harder for somebody else to drive to the rim.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
100%. I mean, Rodney Stuckey, for example, is shooting, I think, 39% since the All-Star break, and he's still playing like 20 minutes a game. You can't have guys like that who can't contribute anything on the floor and play, lackluster defense and are smaller at their position.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, if you're a liability in one area, you can only be a liability in one area. You can't be a liability in 2.
Absolutely agree. Well, something outside of the NBA happened this week, Nick. I know you're a big fan of this fellow. He's actually a big fan of Toronto himself. More Life dropped. Give me some thoughts.
More Life is amazing, and I think the wait was well worth it. If you don't know, this is Drake's new album. I know a lot of you probably hate Drake, and I know a lot of you probably love Drake. So, I mean, I would definitely give it a listen. I've heard positive feedback from people that don't even like him just because it's so good and it's so unique. And there's the one thing I always talk about Drake is like people, I'm not saying he's the best rapper ever. Trust me, I'm not. I'm just saying, he's great at making music and you enjoy listening to his songs because he's able to come at you in so many different ways. I mean, there's a ton of great songs on this. Which ones stick out to you, Kory?
Well, I'm gonna give you my top 5 because I already have my top.
He
5.
already has a top 5. That tells you that. And this album dropped on Saturday night, so he's been busy.
I think I'm on like either listen 16 or 17, and you gotta love Drake too for this reason too. He's got a different accent on every song. There's never a time you hear Drake use the same flow on a song in this album. But my top 5 would be in this order: Can't Have Everything, Teenage Fever, Portland, Do Not Disturb, and Blem. And I like Blem because Drake must have just been chilling somewheres, heard this word, and went, I'm going to go write a song about it.
Yeah, it seems like he's been hanging on a lot in with England, getting his European influence on this, I've heard. So, I mean, for me, I definitely like those. There's so many good songs, so it's like hard for me to pick which ones I like the most. But I think Do Not Disturb is such an awesome outro for a song.
It's like the way, does he kill every outro?
Yo, it really does. And it's just like, yo, he said, I'll give you a summary of 2018. Like the next time he checks in, like he's pretty much like, not a lot of people understand a lot of shit that he says in his music. So they're like, oh, it's not that good. But like, you really got to think when you listen to some of Drake's lyrics too.
Absolutely.
I also thought that collab with Kanye West was awesome.
Oh, Glow. That was really good. And I know if Fake Love didn't drop, I probably would appreciate it more. But like,
yeah, Fake Love's just got played out so much by everybody. So, but that's the first time I heard Kanye in a while. I know we're talking about Drake, but this is the first time I heard like old Kanye, and it sounded so like seemed like there was such a good chemistry between Drake and Kanye in that song too.
Definitely. I think it's just like what everyone hopes for. Like when you hear two guys like that, like Drake and Kanye in the same song, you always hope they drop like an album together. Like, J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar were supposed to drop an album. Like whenever you hear stuff like that, you would love to just see these artists collab on stuff. Yeah,
and there was rumors in the past that Drake and Kanye were working on an album. I know something happened with that. I don't know the exact details to spit it all out on here, but
something always happens.
Yeah, but I mean, this was positive for them to maybe do something more in the future.
And something that Drake does too that I want to mention is like he always finds these beats that are so just new and edgy. Like the first like 5 or 6 songs, like Passion Fruit, the beat from that. All of these songs just have such a like that Jamaican flow to them.
Portland, they use a flute.
Yeah, like what the hell? Like I saw a tweet, Nick, and it said Drake had jerk chicken one time and lost his mind.
Yes, I mean there's that, and you said he has unique beats. He also gets some unique artists on here. Like he puts people on. Like obviously, the first time a lot of people heard of The Weeknd, it was because of Drake. The same with Party Next Door. I mean, the guy Giggs that he got on here, I've never heard him before this. Some of the other artists on here I've never heard before this album. So I think it's cool that he's always trying to like find the freshest dudes out and trying to help them out.
Now, do you think that's Drake stealing flows, or do you think that's Drake helping people?
I mean, I think he's just like collabing with the music. I don't think like him stealing flows. Like he's like I always think that one skill that he has that's really good is his ability to do features and him to like hop on any song and he's able to kind of like fit in. So I don't know. I think that's like part of his versatility. Like if we're talking about NBA players and we're like, oh, LeBron can play all 5 positions. Is he stealing anything? No, he's not. Or, people stole Dirk's fadeaway shot. Are they stealing anything? Is that like bad? No, I don't think so. Drake's doing it better than them probably anyway. So
that might have been the greatest analogy I've ever heard in my entire life, actually.
Well, there you go.
Should listen to what you just said.
And they probably hate LeBron too because they just hate greatness.
That's the struggle. Everyone wants to find and critique greatness.
It's true.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Central Intelligence. We'll be here again next week on Friday. Nick, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem, Kory. And it's great to be on the show. Definitely make sure you guys subscribe to Central Intelligence and give Kory and Matthew a listen because they do a great job every week giving you everything you need to know about that Central Division.